We are seeing more studies come out which show that the booster can have strong, long-lasting positive effects in preventing hospitalizations and deaths. And as we look at the latest data on breakthrough infections, we see firsthand how those who have gotten their boosters have infection, hospitalization, and thank God, COVID-related death rates that are lower than anyone else across the board. Again, we urge everyone to get this critical third dose. Next, as we are just 11 days from the lifting of the indoor masking mandate in our schools, we see the rates of in-school transmission now down to where they were pre-Omicron. And if you look at the right column there, let's go back, the right column, the cumulative, 507 outbreaks. We take each and every single one of them deadly seriously. 578 staff cases, 2,872 student cases. That's cumulative since the end of August. You got to remember that we operate 3,500 buildings and we have 1.4 million kids in school. So I'd say, Judy, Ed, Pat, that's well within any reasonable expectation of where we would be. So we were going to flip over, I think, looking at overall rates of infection. There we go. This is per 1,000 individuals, and this is regardless of where they were exposed, in school or out of school. Those numbers, particularly the recent ones on the right, have returned to where they were pre-Omicron. So looking forward to Monday, March 7th, we feel we will be in a good position for a less uniform approach. Today, the Department of Health, under Judy's leadership, will release its updated public health and safety guidance with regard to masking. I'll ask Judy if she doesn't mind to go into a little bit of detail on that. But to sum it up, we do recommend a return to universal school-wide masking when conditions call for it, including a period of elevated community transmission as defined by the so-called Cali scores during an active local outbreak or when an illness occurs in school, among several other potential scenarios. And a lot of these decisions will quite rightfully be made at the district level with the input of the local health authorities and the local health realities. Of course, nothing will or can prevent any student, educator, or staff member from continuing to wear a mask indoors if they so choose, and to do so without fear of being bullied or otherwise singled out for making that choice. With this guidance, we have every confidence in our schools working together, again, with their own medical personnel and local health officials to maintain safe environments for learning. And finally, here are the latest newly confirmed COVID-related deaths. Again, these are not deaths that occurred on those days. These are the days when the deaths were confirmed by Ed and his team. While it is good to see these numbers decreasing, any number higher than 0 is a number too many. With that, let's take a couple of minutes now to remember 3 more of those we've lost. First up, this gentleman, Ricardo Kaneshiro of Clifton, passed away just 2 weeks before his 62nd birthday. Ricardo had come to New Jersey from his native Peru in 1991. Across his nearly 30 years in New Jersey, he would work in the restaurant industry for Verizon Fios, and for the 5 years prior to his passing in transportation and logistics for a small business in Passaic County. At his first stop in that restaurant in Passaic, he met a waitress, also from Peru, who would become his wife of nearly 30 years, Janet. Together they had 2 children, Rick, who's 18, who I had the great honor of speaking with last week, and Lisa, who's 15, and they each carry on his legacy. We thank Ricardo for choosing to be a part of our New Jersey family. May God bless and watch over his memory and his family he leaves behind. Next up, we honor another member of our immigrant community, Miguel Zuniga. He was 92 years old and had called Pompton Lakes home. He had lived most of his life in his native Ecuador and came to New Jersey in 1989 with his wife Maria because, quite simply, he didn't want to stop working and his prospects in Ecuador had dried up. Upon settling here, Miguel found a job with a medical manufacturing company, and even after his formal retirement from that position, he continued to work part-time until the age of 90. He left, and nobody on either side of me getting the ideas here. He left behind his 7 surviving children, one of whom, daughter Cecilia, I had the great honor of speaking last week, and 18 grandchildren, and his legacy is being passed on to his 5 great-grandchildren. Miguel lived his American dream here in New Jersey. May God bless him and all who he leaves behind. And today we also remember this gentleman, Michael Blacker. He had lived most recently in South Orange, but spent most of his 79 years in Scotch Plains. A graduate of Rutgers Law School, Michael was a fixture in Union County's legal scene, running his own practice for a half a century and serving as Scotch Plains prosecutor. He was also a past president of the Union County Bar Association, among so much else throughout a truly admirable legal career. He was a huge baseball fan, and he had undertaken a successful mission, along with his son Ross, with whom I had the great honor of speaking last week, to visit every single Major League Baseball ballpark. I asked Ross his favorite. He said without hesitating, Wrigley Field in Chicago, Illinois. He was also an aficionado of the best food to be found near every county courthouse in the state. Michael's wife, Marilyn, had passed in 2012, and he's survived by Ross, as I mentioned, and Ross's wife, Shannon, and his grandsons, Connor and Brendan. He also leaves his sister and brother-in-law, Natalie and Ron, and his companion, Bobby. Ross asked me to publicly thank the healthcare workers and staff at the Overlook Medical Center in Summit for the care that they provided to his dad. We thank Michael for his years of service to our state's legal community and to his community, and may God bless him and the family he leaves behind. These are just 3 more from among the thousands of stories of the lives lost. We honor every New Jerseyan we've lost and every family left behind to remember them. Next up, I want to give recognition to one of the organizations whose ability to serve their community was challenged by the pandemic, yet who continue to be here today because of the partnership of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. And today we will visit Plainfield and the Ducre School of Art, which at age 96 is one of the state's oldest art schools. Since its founding in 1926, the Ducre School has nurtured the creativity of thousands of student artists and provided a safe place for them to explore their talents. Executive Director, that guy on the left there, Tim O'Connor, made sure that the Ducre School continued to deliver for its students and community, partnering with the EDA to receive grants that allowed the school to provide virtual education when the times required it, and to also create the long-term plan for remaining financially viable in the face of a pandemic-caused enrollment challenge. And through the EDA's PPE Access program, the school was able to provide students and staff with masks and other things necessary to remain safe. Throughout the pandemic, we needed the arts more than ever. So Tim also teamed with other nonprofit organizations to keep the arts alive, including hosting outdoor concerts on the front porch of the Ducre School's main building. I caught up with Tim last week to thank him for keeping the Ducre School open and continuing its mission of inclusive arts education. I am grateful that together we've put the school on a strong footing with its 100th anniversary, by the way, just around the corner. Check them out, ducre.edu, ducret.edu. And that is it from this chair. We're closing in on the day 2 years ago when everything turned upside down, and we've spent every day since then working hard to get things back right so we can get back to a sense of normal. And today we have only one more briefing. Next Friday, March 4th, 1 p.m. in this very room. And I think that day will bring our state even closer to that sense as well. With that, please help me welcome the woman to my right, who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Judy Persichilli.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. Today we are kicking off Boost NJ2 week. Approximately 250 vaccination sites around the state will be hosting a total of nearly 600 events through Tuesday, March 1st. To find a location near you, go to covid19.nj.gov/boostnj. Our partners in this effort to get more residents boosted include hospitals, megasites, churches, universities, county and local health departments, community health centers, independent pharmacies, and 42 Walmart locations. So nearly 150 events will be held today. So I want to urge all of those who are eligible to get vaccinated or receive a booster to ensure the greatest protection you can have against COVID-19, please get a booster. Most people are eligible to receive a booster if it has been at least 5 months after completing the 2-dose primary mRNA series and at least 2 months after receiving 1 dose of J&J. People who are moderately or severely immunocompromised are eligible to receive additional doses and can receive their booster after an mRNA vaccine, Moderna or Pfizer, at 3 months. Check with your healthcare provider to be sure you are up to date. As the governor mentioned, today the department's Communicable Disease Service is releasing guidance for K-12 school settings and child care settings. We encourage school districts and child care centers to consult with their local health departments and school nurses in determining whether a universal masking policy is appropriate for their schools and child care centers. Providing a healthy and safe environment is key to keeping our children in school. By the state as of March 7th, they remain an important part of a layered approach against COVID-19 and are recommended in certain circumstances. Those measures that include vaccination and boosters, physical distancing, frequent hand washing, and staying home when feeling ill continue to be critically important in disease prevention. As schools and child care centers make decisions, including masking decisions, they should consider the school's or child care center's ability to maintain physical distancing, screen students, perform contact tracing, exclude children and staff with COVID-19 or who have been exposed, and maintain adequate ventilation. The vaccination rates of the students and their staff should also be considered. In addition to school district and child care center policies, staff and parents need to make masking decisions based on their specific situations. Students and school personnel, along with children and staff and child care centers who are immunocompromised or at high risk for severe illness from COVID-19 or live with people that are at high risk, should consider wearing a mask. For schools and child care centers that choose not to implement a universal masking policy, the department recommends that they require masks in the following circumstances. During periods of elevated community transmission, when the COVID-19 activity level index, the Cali score, is elevated to orange or red. During an active outbreak, if indicated based on consultation with your local health department. After returning from isolation or quarantine, the department recommends that children and staff who return to school during the 6 to 10 day of isolation and quarantine should wear a mask. The same recommendation applies to child care centers. Those unable to wear a mask should remain home for the full 10 days of quarantine and isolation. Additionally, the department recommends that children or staff who become ill with symptoms consistent with COVID-19 while in school or in a child care center should wear a mask until they leave the premises. And students participating in Test to Stay modified quarantine program should be required to wear a mask. In addition, per CDC federal order, masks must be worn by all passengers on school buses regardless of the vaccination status. Until lifted, the only exception to that rule is for children under the age of 2 and those who cannot safely wear a mask. So moving on to my daily report, as the governor shared, our hospitals have reported under 1,000 hospitalizations, 961 of COVID-positive patients and persons under investigation. There have been 2 new cases of multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children since our last briefing. There are 186 cumulative cases in the state, and none of the children are currently hospitalized. At the state's veteran homes, since our last briefing, there have been no new cases among the residents and no new cases among the patients at our psychiatric hospitals. The daily percent positivity as of February 19th for New Jersey is 4.65%. The northern part of the state is 4.12%, central 5.13%, and the southern part of the state 5.38%. So that concludes my report. Please continue to stay safe, get vaccinated, get boosted. Please join us for Boost NJ 2 week now through Tuesday, March 1st. If you need a booster shot or are not up to date on your COVID-19 vaccination, now is the time to get it. To find a location near you, go to covid19.nj.gov/boost New Jersey. Thank you.
Judy, thank you as always for the update and for your leadership across the board, and thank you for the color on the guidance on schools. And that's going to be coming out later today, I think. So folks will get a chance to look at that. Pat, great to be with you. Thank you for everything. I think big topic is probably weather. We got some fairly nasty weather coming in late tomorrow into Friday, so take it away. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. That's what I will brief on. Again, I know it's very warm and nice out this afternoon, but that's quickly going to change over tomorrow afternoon. Pretty much a storm that lasts Thursday evening into Friday evening, so looking at both commutes Friday morning as well as Friday evening. If it's a more northerly track, it'll be that'll reduce snow and sleet. If it's a little more southerly track, will increase snow and sleet amounts. We do expect advisories to be expanded to other counties depending upon what that looks like. The certainty around this forecast is not all there yet, but from this afternoon, tomorrow morning, we'll be on with the National Weather Service as well as our county OEM partners, state OEM partners, and then we'll obviously circle up tomorrow night with regards to a decision about state offices come Friday morning. So winter is still with us, and I would, as always, steer folks to ready.nj.gov for all the updates as it pertains to this coming storm. Thanks, Gov.
Pat, thank you. And it looks like this is a sort of I-78 up, highest accumulation at this point?
That's right. Right now, from north of 78 and up into the northwest is a 2 to 6 inches, but again, that could either go up or come down depending upon where this ultimately tracks.
And down around here, you're talking about
an inch.
An inch or so. Okay. Thank you. And probably hitting both the morning and the evening commute.
That's correct. Hopefully transitioning to all rain by Friday afternoon.
Got it. Thank you for that and for all. I think we'll start over here with Brent. Ruth's got the microphone again. Remind you again, a week from Friday at 1 o'clock, we'll be next up to bat, and that'll be the last one, God willing, for a long time. Brent?
So with the briefings ending, what's left? Are all state offices open? Are we still waiting for all of them to be open? When will masks be gone from state buildings and mass transit? Is the New Jersey National Guard sending help to D.C. for over the trucker convoy? And there's a trucker convoy planned for New Jersey next weekend. What preparations is the state taking to make sure roads aren't blocked?
Yeah, what's left, some of this is federal. So I want to remind everybody, planes, trains, buses, healthcare settings, Judy, are all federal masking mandates. So that's something that the CDC would and those are not requirements, are in many cases we strongly recommend that those are, they're not recommendations, they're mandates. So that's certainly left. I think we'll review the masking for state offices relatively, I'd say relatively near future. We want to get the schools up and running. We're pretty much getting back to where we want to be, which is normal. National Guard is going to DC. That was a request, I believe, Pat, 20 vehicles and over 100 manpower, is that right?
That's correct, Gov.
And listen, we don't let politics get in the middle of decisions on whether to accept requests like that. We did it during the Trump administration to protect monuments, and we're doing it in this case, I assume, to make sure that we don't see what happened in Ottawa happen in our nation's capital. And Pat, do you want to give color on a couple of the, we know there are a couple of rally points in New Jersey.
There are. We do continue to work with our local, county, state, and federal partners to monitor those 2 rally points in New Jersey on the March 5th, 6th weekend. We have had calls with our partners, Port Authority, FBI, all of our partners in this, to the governor's point, to make sure that we can mitigate, if not eliminate, anything happening like what we saw unfold up in Ottawa. So certainly an ongoing monitoring from our Regional Operations Intelligence Center, but we want to make sure from a public safety, keeping that in mind, as well as travel and commerce aren't disrupted by that, those rally points, Brent.
I would add, Judy, I think you and Ed would want me to add to this. What's left is we still need to get people more vaccinated and boosted. That is going to continue to be a huge priority of ours. So we're going to be pounding away at that, whether it's special weeks like Boost NJ2 week that we're kicking off today, but that will continue to be a major effort. I was on with the White House a couple of days ago, getting our opinion as to what we would want to see in place if, God forbid, there's another wave down the road, a different variant, and just instant access in scale to testing, vaccine, PPE, hospital capacities, antivirals, monoclonal antibodies, whatever it is that we've got a wall of resources that is built both at the federal and state level that we will have at our disposal. Thank you for that. Let's go here, please.
Hello, good afternoon, Governor. What is the enforcement mechanism for the booster deadline on February 28th for healthcare workers? How is the state going to ensure employers are compliant? Also, long-term care and hospital industries are looking to push back the booster deadline on February 28th. Do you plan on it? DOC still has a low vaccination rate, reporting around 43%.
Who has a low?
DOC.
Yep.
Reporting around 43% right after last week's deadline, with thousands of religious exemptions pending. What's your reaction to that? Do you plan to renew the public health emergency? And would you like to see the administrative waivers and directives that rely on the public health emergency extended, even if the public health emergency is not? And lastly, is anything actually changing with regards to quarantine, social distancing, and contact tracing for school guidance? Since these are recommendations rather than requirements, would it be possible for districts to return to pre-pandemic operations entirely under this guidance? Yeah.
So on your first, if I understood several questions on the deadlines that are coming up, February 28th, long-term care rates, what are you doing to ensure that? Department of Corrections, we have no intention of changing the deadlines. However, as I was walking in here, I think we got some CDC guidance, which is different than we had before, and I want to make sure that our executive orders are not inconsistent with that guidance. So can you bear with us on that one? Paramel, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I believe the CDC recommended that some individuals should wait up to 8 weeks for their second dose. So Commissioner Persicelli and the Department of Health are reviewing that, and if we need to adjust any of the timelines to be consistent with that, we will.
Is that fair?
Yeah, it's primarily males between the ages of 12 and 39. Specifically, they're recommending 18 to 39 delay the second dose in the primary series of an mRNA. I don't know whether it's both Moderna and Pfizer.
Yeah. So so I'm going to say two different things which may seem at odds with each other. We're not going to back away from the mandate, but we want to make sure our executive order is consistent with the guidance. I hope that makes sense. No news in the public health emergency, but we have signaled clearly that we want to bring this to a head as soon as possible. There are elements of that nobody ever sees, which are really important to make sure, for instance, that Judy continues to get the data out of the hospitals that we get and things like that that never touch any of the residents but are incredibly important for us to be able to manage this pandemic. So we just got to figure out, we've had good conversations with legislative leadership. We have to figure out a smart way forward on that. And I think, Judy, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think it's a work in progress on the non-masking guidance in schools on things like social distancing, one-way halls, partitions. So that's something, bear with us. We clearly are trying to, as safely and responsibly, but as quickly as we can, get to a normal situation. So thank you for that. Joey, I skipped you inadvertently. I apologize.
I will somehow forgive you. Got a few things here, so I'll talk fast. The mayor of Bloomfield is criticizing a contract.
Could you go a little closer with the mic, Ruth, there? Sorry.
The mayor of Bloomfield is criticizing a contract the NJ Turnpike Authority made with Chick-fil-A, given the restaurant's anti-gay history. What are your thoughts on that deal? Would you consider using your power over the Turnpike Authority to do anything about it? Do you plan on taking sides in either of the potential head-to-head state Senate contests created by the new legislative map that's between Senator Stack and Saco in Hudson County, and then between Senator Gill and former Governor Cody in Essex County? Texas unveiled a new directive today that essentially declares affirming transgender kids and gender confirmation surgery as child abuse. I'm not implying that your administration would do anything like that, but do you plan on making trans issues a priority at all during this legislative session? And finally, with understanding that it's a national security issue that you may not have much power over, do you have any comment on the unfolding situation in Russia and Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you. I have a fair amount on that, but I won't back the truck up. I only have tangentially heard of the Chick-fil-A contract or potential contract, and I'm a big fan of the mayor's, by the way. Listen, I think I would put our record in the LGBTQIA plus community up against any American state, and we wear that as a badge of honor. I don't have any particular insight on the potential contract, so bear with us on that one. Listen, no comment on any of the races or the hypothetical scenarios, but I do want to commend the commissioners from both sides for a thorough and fair process to reach a consensus map. And as governor, I look forward to working with both parties in the legislature on our shared priorities. We're working furiously on our budget, putting it together, which I'm looking forward, God willing, in person to delivering on March 8th. And I will say, as I guess the titular leader of the Democratic Party, I would personally like to commend Chairman Leroy Jones for his leadership throughout this process, but we'll leave it at that. The Texas point is news to me, but I think I don't have any news on what we might pursue in this legislative session. I haven't spoke to the leadership on it, but we've been, I think, I'd take my first comment in answer to the question about the LGBTQIA plus community and say the same thing about the transgender community, which is I've said many times, is the piece of that broader community that I still think needs the most amount of attention. So based on the surface of the question, the way you've asked it, what they're doing in Texas, that to me is completely unacceptable. You know, we ask ourselves all the time on this Russian situation, most importantly, what interests in New Jersey are potentially impacted. So that's the first priority you have, and on that list I would have at least, and Pat, you may want to weigh in, but it would be number one, the women and men who are in our armed services, who, while the president has said he's not going to deploy active military to Ukraine, you've got a lot of deployments to NATO countries, Germany, East, the Baltics, so their safety and security, many of whom are from Jersey, are in our top of mind and thoughts and prayers. Cyber, we are at a very heightened state of alert and defense on cyber, and that includes not just state government and agencies, but also working with our private sector players and obviously working with our federal partners. Energy prices, clearly in this case, given Russia is one of the few global elements of its economy these days is fossil fuels, or are fossil fuels, the impact, knock-on impact that could have on energy prices in an environment where energy prices, gas prices at the pump are already at unacceptably high levels. So those tend to be the first wave of concerns and the overwhelming concern. Only because you asked the question, I'll editorialize to a couple of points that are far beyond New Jersey. Vladimir Putin is a thug. He runs a kleptocracy. This is a bad, bad, bad dude. who has no right whatsoever deciding about somebody else's borders. And anybody who was laudatory toward him, who's an American, should be ashamed of themselves. And that includes former President Donald Trump and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who should literally be ashamed of themselves by saying laudatory things toward this guy. This guy is the enemy, not the Russian people. This guy and his cronies are the enemy of the United States of America. Let there be no doubt about that. Thank you for asking me. Alex, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Dr. Lifshitz, I have a question about the numbers that were shown.
Thank God somebody's pulling him in.
I always do. The numbers that were shown earlier in the briefing, they showed for the 23rd, 69 deaths reported, the 17th, 65. Am I misreading that? Are these weekly numbers, or are there certain dates at which your confirmation of COVID deaths spike and go higher, one than the other? Just wanted to get a sense of that. For you, Commissioner Persicelli, the governor just said that he wants to see more people vaxxed and boosted. If the numbers are improving, why? If we're moving to an endemic phase, why do we need more people vaxxed and boosted? Governor Dr. Lifshitz said several months ago that he believes that we're reaching the endemic stage if we can get COVID deaths in New Jersey in 1 year at 1,000 or fewer. We're obviously not going to make it this year because of the toll in January. Yep. When do you think we will? I also wanted to ask, just in general, about the moves that you're making by scaling back or ending your briefings in a little over a week, by looking at the hospitalization numbers, looking at the new case numbers. Are we over this? Is it over? Are you willing to declare victory over the virus? And if so, when the kids go back to school on the morning of March 7th without masks, are you willing to, on the morning of March 7th, authorize that full top-to-bottom investigation into your administration's response to the pandemic, including nursing homes that you said you would? Are you ready on the morning of March 7th to end masking mandates in state buildings, including this one? Are you on the morning of March 7th ready to reopen the MVCs and the one-stop career centers? Are you on the morning of March 7th ready to end the vaccination mandates for state workers, including correctional police officers, and end testing in that particular option? If it's over, why not let it be over?
Well, that was a wind-up, man. On your first question, they're all good questions, but the first one is a point, I believe, if I understood it correctly, but Ed, you should weigh in here. We present this under dates, and it appears as though that's what we're acknowledging past that day. And in fact, the folks who sadly passed on that day are actually embedded in the hospitalization numbers. Those passings are confirmed on that day, and they may be from different periods. And Ed, would love to bring you in, thanks to Alex from the bullpen, and give some more color on that.
Sure. The numbers that we report every day as far as how many deaths are the deaths that have been confirmed by the Department of Health for that day. You asked about whether there was any variation as to what happens and why they seem to peak on certain days, and the answer is yes, because they are determined by other things happening before us, namely things like death certificates have to be completed. And those things tend to slow down over the weekends and on the holidays, which is why typically on Mondays we put out the lowest number for the week, and then we'll go up a bit on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before dropping again as the week progresses.
Judy, on vaccinations, obviously this still matters.
Yeah, and you sort of answered the question when you asked about the deaths. We still see increasing deaths. I shouldn't say increasing. We have deaths are decreasing in our hospitals, which is a good sign, but they are still in double digits, and they are primarily individuals that are unvaccinated. Of those that are vaccinated right now in the hospital, of the 50% of the 920 that are breakthrough and vaccinated, 35% of them are unboosted. So if you get boosted, your protection against severe hospitalization, disease, and death are significantly lower. That's a reason to get boosted. And I think we're going to see boosting for a while, similar to what we see with some other vaccinations.
Ed, on the third question, Alex, Ed, am I right in saying, this goes back now, it might be going back to spring of 21, that, and not that any death, any number over zero is tragic and we mourn every single one. Do I recall you're saying that a bad flu season was more like 2,000 deaths a year in New Jersey?
Closer to 1,000. We usually range somewhere between about 350 to 1,400, depending on the year. So about 1,000 is where I'd make a bad flu season.
Okay. So 1,000 is about 3 deaths a day, not to put this into statistics. 2,000 is about 6 passings a day. Again, we mourn the loss of each of them, but I think if you start to get into that neighborhood and you stay there, it's further proof that you're in that sort of endemic reality as opposed to the pandemic reality. No, I love the March 7th question, and I mean that because all of those things are on the board, but they're not all going to be on March 7th. We want to do this in a, I mentioned, I'm not sure you had come in the room yet. I think you were here. You know, the one example of the question you asked, the mask mandate in state buildings, what's that look like? Well, that's something we want to get the schools organized and then get to something like that fairly soon thereafter. We'll get to all of that, including the full review, MVC, unemployment, the whole shoot and match. It won't be on March 7th, but these are things that we're talking. I don't think there was one item you brought up that we're not talking with health, most importantly health experts, but the whole team as to where we go from here. Thank you. We'll go in the back there.
Afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
On the school mask guidance, are schools actually allowed to choose not to follow the recommendations on masking and quarantining? And should parent surveys be a factor in a district's decisions on mask policies? And according to the CDC, the Omicron variant BA2 is now widespread and growing in the U.S. Have you found any BA2 cases in New Jersey? Do we have sufficient testing capacity for another wave? And does that give you any pause in regards to lifting the school mandate?
Judy, I'll start, but you and Ed should come in here. If a school district wants to enforce a mandate, even though we will no longer enforce it on March 7th, they have that right if individuals choose to want to wear it. Parents are clearly enormously important constituents, but we would hope that everybody continues to make the decisions based on the science and the data and the facts, working with their local health authorities. But clearly things like we all know, and parents have been particularly articulate on this, the mental health strain, if we could do it responsibly to be able to have our precious kids in schools without these on, obviously that is the the hope, as long as we can do it safely and responsibly. On the variant, do you want to address that? I guess I'll just hit the testing. The answer is yes, we're confident we're going to have the testing. That was part of the conversation I had with the White House a few days ago. They know the resources we need. They're probably hearing similar things from other states, but clearly testing capacity, not just do you have it, but can you get it instantly at scale and it's accessible is the key. But on the variant, Judy or Ed, do you want to weigh in?
The BA2 variant, what some people call the stealth variant, although I'm not particularly crazy about that name, a couple of things about it. First off, you know, the real question is, do we think that this is going to be a greater risk for New Jersey or for the United States? Do we think it's going to take over from where Omicron did? And there is some evidence out there that it may be a little bit more transmissible than the standard Omicron variant, but the short answer is we don't know yet. Certainly we're not seeing any big increase in cases in the United States or in New Jersey from it. We have been seeing some BA2 in New Jersey for the last several weeks, and over the last 4 weeks, it's been just over 1% of the cases that we've sampled in New Jersey. So far and away, the more standard Omicron at almost 98% of all the cases we've been sampling is far and away the most common variant. I don't see any evidence yet that BA2 is sweeping through or likely to sweep through, although of course that's why we do the surveillance, is to make sure we know what's going to happen.
You good on that, Judy? Joey, it just occurred to me, this is back to you and meant to say this, New Jersey has, like a lot of other nationalities and ethnicities, we have a big Ukrainian population. And the North American, the Ukrainian Orthodox, the Ukrainian Orthodox North American headquarters are in South Boundbrook in New Jersey. And I spoke to the Archbishop Daniel Zelensky short time before coming in here, just to make sure he knew we were there for him. He had just come back from basically a mission there and expressed the concern, obviously, that we're seeing play out on television. But that's another particular New Jersey point. It's less our interests in terms of cold-blooded gas prices or cyber incursions, but these are valued, important members of our New Jersey family. So I meant to say that. Brian, welcome.
Governor, thank you very much. Questions for you and for the Colonel, please, regarding Washington, D.C. What does it say to you about the state of our politics that our National Guard is needed down there for a State of the Union and this supposed trucker convoy? For the Colonel, please, if your troopers encounter 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 trucks traveling in a convoy down to D.C. over the next couple of weeks at a crawl on the turnpike of 5 or 10 miles an hour, or any other roadway for that matter, what will you tell your troopers to do to avoid total gridlock on that particular highway? And then I would ask both of you your reaction, please, and whether or not you think our soldiers, our guardsmen, would be endangered by this Pentagon notice that they will not be carrying any kind of arms, especially in light of what we saw on January 6th, just a couple of years ago.
Pat, I'll start and throw it over to you. Is that all right? What's it say? I mean, as I mentioned, we don't let politics get in the way of decisions like this. When we get asked, and we invariably get asked, Pat, I think it's fair to say, whether it's you and your colleagues or the Guard, we are at or near the top of the list because we answer the bell as professionally, I think, as any American state. And we don't let the politics get in the middle of it. So you may recall that at the height of the passion and demonstrations and anger over the murder of George Floyd, we were asked by the prior administration to protect monuments, which we did. And that was an American moment. And we are in a different American moment now. And our job is not to let the politics get in the middle of it. We're going to do what we need to do to protect our nation's capital. Pat, I think I'm going to leave it to you. What do you and your colleagues do if we see a convoy we saw a little of this, largely motorcycles and pickup trucks, not tractor trailers, a year and a half or so ago. And also, how do you feel about the statement about safety and not being armed for a guardsman?
Thank you, Governor. With regards to the commercial vehicles, I would, again, moving at a slow rate of speed, Brian, is something that we don't want, but coming to a complete stop offers a different scenario. We hope it doesn't come to that. It's one thing to rally and travel on our interstates to get to a certain rally point. Where they go when they leave New Jersey is obviously up to them. I would hope that we don't have to use our heavy-duty wreckers. If they come to a stop, they will be ordered to keep moving, but we are planning for a scenario where we would have heavy-duty wreckers standing by to tow them at their expense off of our interstates. And with regard to the National Guard being unarmed, usually in those types of missions and those plannings, they usually get partnered up with somebody who is armed in law enforcement. I think back to when we hosted Super Bowl 48, and we used hundreds of National Guard members, and they were not armed for that Super Bowl security mission. Again, drawing some type of comparison between Washington, D.C. and that mission, the fact that they are a force multiplier, and sometimes their presence alone helps us in mitigating some of those challenges that come with large crowds like that.
Well said. Thank you. Nikita, is that you?
It is indeed.
Good to see you.
Afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
So I just have a couple of quick ones. I'm wondering if you've had any clarity as to the extent of retirements and terminations related to the vaccine mandate over at the Department of Corrections. Next, I'm wondering if you have any plans or if you've had any discussions about consolidating some of the state prison populations to account for any potential staff shortage.
Is that it? Yep. On the former, I don't, but we can follow up with you. Alex Altman, can you follow up with Nikita? Thank you for that. Consolidation is a topic that has been a regular one, but not specific to this. So, in fact, Paramount, we had a conversation about this, in fact, this morning, as we're looking at as I mentioned, putting the budget together, just trying to figure out where the need is. So that's been our population has gone down meaningfully. And you want about 1,000 when that happens. And that doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions, but I think we've brought our population down as responsibly as any state in America. Bail reform that actually works overwhelmingly. These public health releases of nonviolent offenders, while at first blush you see that, well then you realize these are folks who are at or near the end of their sentence to begin with, and the recidivism rates have been, by any other normal criminal justice standard, I think the last time I looked it was 9% since the beginning of the pandemic. So consolidation, right-sizing is an ongoing reality, not specific necessarily to this. That doesn't mean it couldn't be, or that's not an option, but that's, at the moment, it has not been. Dave, please take us home.
Thanks, Governor. A measure has been introduced that would require the MVC to restore all in-person services. I know you don't comment on legislation, but what do you think of this idea in general? You mentioned the COVID updates are coming to an end. Some people may take that to mean, oh, great, the pandemic is finally over. What do you say to these people? And under what circumstances will the COVID updates begin again, at least temporarily? Specifically, what would you need to see with the Commissioner and Dr. Ed on this issue? And finally, as you may know, Governor, we've done a couple of stories lately about the ongoing problems that people continue to have with the Jersey unemployment system. Yes, things have improved significantly, but I have literally been deluged with emails from dozens of people over the last several days, some thankful for the coverage we're giving, others are frustrated, some are enraged, desperate, exhausted. They cannot pay their mortgages, their rents, their car payments. Some can't feed their families. They're getting evicted, and many of them say they never get a response after UI applications get stuck in limbo or even approved. Sometimes they're waiting months to get a response, if at all. Governor, they need help. What do I tell the people that are sending me these emails? Luis, Ellen, Rydell, Peggy, Asterg, Sergio, Lynn, Elfie, Jeff. Sorry, there's nothing that can be done. You've hinted about opening the one-stops to people that are in trouble in person. Why not order it now? If the Labor Department has 10 people working on claims with an unusual twist, why not 50 or 100? Yeah. These are desperate, real heartbreaking cases. I believe you care, Governor, but what do you tell them?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with that one because that's a pretty emotional one. And I have to separate, most importantly to say, if there is frustration and there is legitimate claim that is not being met, I have nothing but sympathy and commit that we're going to help them get it resolved. I think the specific step in that respect we could take, and I'll ask Alex to maybe be the intermediary, is to get their details immediately to Rob Acero-Angelo and his senior team, and we'll ask Rob to literally reach out to, Rob or them to reach out to each one of them. Send them to Alex, absolutely. So on the specific names, I'm not suggesting it's just them, but whenever we hear of someone's situation, particularly over the past probably year or more, it's let's understand their specifics. Again, nothing but sympathy and resolve to bring this to a head. Overwhelmingly, these situations are hand-tailored suits. Many of them, sadly, are not going to end up being valid for one reason or another, which is a sad result, not through any lack of good intentions by the individuals. So it does require that heavy lift. And again, this will give folks no solace who are frustrated and waiting. And I know people hear this, but there's evidence to back it up. We'll put our record up against any state over the past 2 years. I know people hear that and say, but it is true, and there's data to back that up. The one-stops, I have 2 comments on that. They're coming. I think it's a matter of weeks. I said that last week, and I think it is a matter of weeks. Bear with me on that. But that will happen. But I also want to caution folks, I think there's a rightful human nature. You know what? I'm going to feel better because I can see Dave Mathau in front of me and I know he's my guy. I want to make sure everyone's expectations are managed, that I'm not sure the facts in terms of how quickly these get resolved or how they get resolved is going to be any different. We are beholden to an antiquated federal unemployment benefits system, technology system. In that same budget meeting we had this morning, we talked about putting a further investment into our systems, falling short of throwing good money after bad until the feds get their act together, but doing everything we can to get our systems in as good a shape as possible. I think on I'll go back to the beginning and I'll probably be briefer given the clock. On motor vehicles, I think you go back, my mantra and my hope would be you go back to in-person where that step is a more efficient step than the online step that we've morphed into over the past couple of years. It can't be, gosh, I know we have the Model T, but I really miss my horse and buggy, right? So if we've made a substantial customer service improvement because of an online capability, I would expect, I don't want to speak for Sue and her team, I'd expect would hold that. But if we had to go online because that's all we could do and it's an inferior experience for the consumer, responsibly live in its midst. You know, right? Approaching something, as we've discussed earlier today and we've discussed many times, a similar reality with flu. You know, I've said this many times, I get a flu shot religiously every October. Whether or not that's going to be true with COVID, no one knows, but you get it. You're not requiring, I don't ask you or make you show me whether or not you've got your annual flu shot. Could we be in a similar situation with this? I'll bet you we'll ultimately get to that situation. So it's not defeated. That's not a word I would use. And I think, Alex, I neglected to answer that when you asked that as well. It's not saying we've defeated this thing. It's saying that we can responsibly live in its midst. And I'd say lastly, Judy or Ed, you should weigh in here, or Pat, what would cause us to get back at this table? I would think a material deterioration in the data that we track to make the important decisions for public health. Is that fair to say? So it would need to be not just a slight drift one way or the other, but a material and meaningful deterioration. Sorry it takes so long. Judy, Ed, thank you. Pat, Alex, Paramel, Ruth, everybody, keep doing what you're doing. We've got this thing on the run. There's just no question about it. The more folks that get vaccinated, the more folks that get boosted, the faster we're going to get this thing on the run. The normal, back to normal that we all want will come sooner and more fulsome. Keep up the great work. We'll see you again a week from Friday at 1 o'clock. God bless.